As I was preparing for this talk, I kept asking myself, how can I make sure this is memorable? And I figure I have two options. One, talk about something that is interesting and funny and informative. Or two, vomit all over the stage because I'm so nervous. Now, I've got my feet in both options right now, so odds are this is going to be memorable. My name is Micah Dyer, and I've been a member of RFMA for about 5 years now. And over the years, I've gotten to know quite a few of you, but what you may not know about me is I love history. Learning about where we've come from and where we're going and how we got here, it can all be so interesting. So it occurred to me one day that in history, there could be a valuable lesson to be learned when it comes to facilities management. So I started doing a ton of research, digging and learning everything I could. And one evening, I was in the darkest, coldest part of the library, and I was poring over some ancient text. And I came to realize that I was looking at the oldest known example of facilities management. You see, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a struggle between a facilities manager and his chosen service provider. Now, I doubt that any of you have done the research that I have on this, so I'm going to introduce you to a couple of the characters. First, we have the Emperor, who's a facility manager just like you. This is a guy who started from the bottom and has worked his way up to the top. He's created and managed PM programs, navigated office politics, handled store manager and vendor issues, and now he's taken on the huge responsibility of managing the galaxy's newest concept, the Death Star. Now we need to take a second and talk about the Death Star. According to these historic documents, the Death Star would have been an estimated 32 quadrillion square feet of space. To put that in perspective, that is nearly 900 Empire State Buildings. To say that the Emperor was a busy man would be a huge understatement, which is why he needed a vendor whom he could trust, which is where we meet a Mr. Darth Vader. Now, Darth Vader has built a widely known reputation in the galaxy. He's a single father of 2 beautiful children, and he is very good at the services he performs. But he has a dark side. You see, in an effort to please his customers and win more business, he's agreed to take on services that he cannot perform himself. Instead, if he receives such a service call, he handles getting that out to his subcontractors. Now, these historic documents focus a lot on Darth's struggle with his dark side. I've taken a few examples, and I want to share them with you. First, as the Death Star was nearing its completion, a couple of droids had stolen the blueprints. The Emperor asked Darth Vader to locate these droids and return the blueprints. But unfortunately, Mr. Vader is not certified to perform this kind of a task. Instead, he subs this out to the stormtroopers. Time and time again, these stormtroopers are unable to capture these droids, even at one point being 3 feet away from them, but being tricked and the droids get away. Later on, the Emperor has a problem with some pests that have gotten aboard his ship. He again reaches out to his go-to vendor, Mr. Vader, and asks him to find these pests and get rid of them. But alas, Darth Vader chooses the dark side and subs this out. Now, it's important to point out that Mr. Vader did not individually hire the stormtroopers. Somebody else signs their paychecks. That means he's unable to personally vouch for their skill sets or lack thereof, and because he's not on site himself, he has to take their word for it when they say, looked everywhere, found no issues. Because they weren't able to find the pests that were quite literally under their feet, they end up wreaking havoc on the ship and even disabling the tractor beam, which is a very expensive repair. So by now you're asking yourself, well, what does Darth do? These historic documents make it very clear. When Darth wants something done right, he does it himself. An emergency service request came through the Force for a nasty old Jedi Knight that was on the Death Star. Darth, being tired of being made the fool by his subcontractors, decides to handle this issue himself. With a flick of his wrist, he's able to destroy this guy without as much as breaking a sweat. had he sent this on to the stormtroopers, they would have likely been cut in half or had their lasers reflected back into their eyes. But it doesn't stop there. The Emperor had a unique problem with some dirty rebels that he needed to get taken care of. He decides to send a service request over to Darth, asking him to find the galaxy's most evil villain, Mr. Han Solo. Now, Darth could have easily taken the easy way out and made this his subcontractor's problem, but instead he decides to dive into this mask first and try to find this guy. Using his contacts and experience that can only be gained from decades of service, he's able to find out that Han will be staying at Bespin, or commonly known as Cloud City, and he decides to reach out to the Baron Administrator and set up a fake dinner party where he can lure the rebels in and capture them once and for all. But he doesn't stop there. He goes above and beyond the original service request and decides to have Mr. Han Solo humanely frozen in carbonite and then hung prominently on the wall of a local businessman's collection. Now, I could go on and on with more examples of self-performing versus subcontracting, but Debbie said I'd be in trouble if I went over, so I just want to leave you with a few thoughts. First, even a long time ago, managing a facility was hard work, which is why it is still so important to choose providers that can self-perform rather than use the dark side. Now, I was able to find a clip of Darth Vader on his deathbed, and he's talking to his son about things that he's learned throughout his years of service.
I've got to save you.
You already have. Look, you were right. You were right about
Self-performing.
Tell your sister. You were right.
About self-performing.
Thank you guys so much.